that distance, okay? Later on, you continue the approach now without EFVS, and this is a test flight, and you continue until you see with your natural eyes that same group of lights. Then you measure again the distance, and this is what we call the enhanced visibility factor, is the division of the two factors, okay? And this is the famous 1/3, you know, 1/3 is this enhanced flight visibility factor. And the test flight, you will do several tests, and then, I mean, this is at random points, but just to give you an idea on how it will look like. And then you will have this line that will be the enhanced flight visibility factor, you know, the average of this, and they do some statistics, and then they determine that, yeah, correct, is 1/3. This is another curve and another group of test data. Again, it's Mickey Mouse, so this is not exactly a real test campaign, but it will look something like that. And then you will have the other one. This time is for a visibility factor of 0.5. Remember that now with the new certification criteria, you could have more than 1/3. So let's go to EFVS and EFVS with operational credit under CS issue 1. The CS issue 1 allowed these two types of equipment. The EVS, which is on the right-hand side, had no operational credits, and then the EFVS with operational credits, so a long name, was that EVS that allowed to use the enhanced visibility until 100 feet. So you will come in your instrument segment, okay, and to your decision height. So here, I hope that you can see my mouse flying normally like any other aircraft. Then from that point, you will have your synthetic vision. Synthetic vision is the term we use for enhanced visibility, you know, enhanced vision in EFVS, but in the old concept was synthetic vision, was the term used in the regulation. So you will use this for example, if we are doing an ELS category 1, you arrive in the instrument segment to 200 feet. From 200 feet to 100 feet on the visual segment, you are visually through the synthetic vision with your runway. You will use this up to 100 feet, and then with your natural vision, you will continue from 100 feet to land. In EVS, with no operational credit, then this was not possible. You had that wonderful equipment, but the reality was that you were doing a normal ILS. So you go into your instrument segment through your instrument until 200 feet, and then from then on, you use natural vision. Of course, you have the enhanced flight vision system, the enhanced vision system, but because you didn't have an operational credit, you shouldn't legally use it to acquire the visual cues. So that was the old concept. Again, now in the new regulation, EVS, no operational credit can be still cannot be used and certified, but the EFVS with operational credit doesn't exist anymore in the regulation. So you cannot certify anymore an equipment under EVS with operational credit. That certification criteria is gone, and the equivalent of this will be EFVS A approach, okay? Which is the second page. The second page describes how in the future now under CS issue 2 you can certify those equipments. You have two options: the EFVS A approach, which is the first one, 100 operation. That means that you go in the instrument segment, enhance this vision from the minima to 100 feet under the visual segment, and then at 100 feet you need to acquire natural vision and land, or go around. But in addition to this, CS issue 2 allows this new concept, EFVS-L landing, and this is a touchdown operation. So you use your instrument segment until MDA, decision height, decision altitude. Also in non-precision approaches, you can use MDA. And then from then on, you use your enhanced fly your enhanced vision system, your enhanced flight vision system up to the landing, and then you land. So these are the two options that you can certify today, EFVS-A, EFVS-L. The other ones are legacy, and you cannot certify them anymore. Although you can still operate them as it was an old certification, and we have grandfathering rights for that. The part 3 is what type of approaches you can fly using those equipment that I just described. And the first one is the EFVS 200. You're going to receive a more detailed explanation later on with Olivier, so I don't going to go much. The point that I want to make is that the applicability is for Part CAT, Part NCC, and this is quite important, I think, because is something that it was originally meant to be for non-commercial. Next page, 1 second. The type of approach will be very similar to the EFVS 100. So you basically fly, you continue through the approach band. Oh, sorry. You continue to the approach band. You use 1/3 only. You cannot use 0.5, so half or anything. There's a fixed amount of enhanced flight visibility, which is the 1/3. If you see at 200 feet, then you continue. Otherwise, you go around. And then at 200 feet, you need to see with natural vision, or you go around. More explanation will be provided with Olivier. The next option or the next operation is EFVS approach, which is very similar to what I described before under certification. So it's basically at 100 feet, minima, MDA, decision height, whatever. You acquire your vision through your enhanced vision. I'm sorry, because I have a term here that it shouldn't be. It's enhanced vision, and here is enhanced vision. And then you continue to natural vision at 100 feet to land. And the other option is EFVS-L, which, as I said, instrument segment, and then enhanced vision up to the ground. In a very nice, better picture, you can see something like EFVS 100. You fly your instrument segment, you reach minima, then you fly your EFVS segment, which is in the visual segment of the approach, and then from there on, natural vision. And here, the picture of the landing, which is instrument segment, normally as any other aircraft, and then in the minima, you continue your visual segment through your enhanced visibility and your enhanced flight vision system up to the touchdown, and then you taxi out. And that's it for me. We can receive questions. I am 3 minutes late. So let's go to the questions. Give me 1 second because I need to stop sharing and look at the questions. 1 second, I need to activate here as well my questions.
That's slide.
Right.
Highlighting film. Open. Q&A. Highlight the first one there for you already.
Okay. So let me check. So we have many questions. So let me see which one we can answer. Which is
me to unhighlight that first one.
Yeah, because this one is more for the operational demonstration, and maybe we can discuss this later on. So we can answer, well, this is not specifically for our authority, but maybe it's appropriate to, I'm going to highlight this one, the CDFA, this one, exactly. So we're going to answer this one. Will all non-precision approaches flown with CDFA technique be categorized as 3D approaches and thereby have a decision height, decision altitude? This is covering the regulation. It has to be an aircraft means. It's not like you just fly the CDFA There are two possibilities basically to fly the CDFAs. You can fly that as a pilot, like doing some mathematics, etc., but with no guidance in the aircraft nor on the ground. Then this is not a 3D approach. So the definition is in the Annex 1, and you can see if you go to the definition of 3D, it needs to be, you need to have some guidance, either done by the automatics of the aircraft, and Airbus and Dassault has this type of FPA in Airbus, iPad management that provides a brick to the pilot, and other different types in Dassault. But at the end of the day, either you need an aircraft equipped that provides some kind of vertical guidance, or you have an instrument approach that allows you to follow a glide path. In those cases, the CDFA is a 3D, and then therefore this is correct. But not all CDFAs are 3D operations. So no, not all the CDFAs are 3D operations. Bo, I don't know if I am saying something stupid. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just one little piece I would like to add is that by definition, a CDFA has to be flown with a decision height anyway. So I think that was part of the question. The 3D is a bit tricky. It's divided into what the procedure is, what the procedure design is, etc. But at any rate, there is a need to use decision height, or decision altitude, how you operate. But how you arrive at that can be done in several ways, with or without an add-on and all that discussion. But it still is there's a need for decision height or altitude.
Thank you, Bo. So again, Anders Hofmeister, thank you for your question. Not all the CDFAs are 3D approaches. So, and I think with the Bo explanation as well is clarify the part of the decision height and decision altitude. Okay, so thank you. We can clear up this question. John, can we move to this one? Okay, so next question is anonymous, please. I mean, obviously you can write a question as anonymous, but just we appreciate when, especially when you write the organization in which you work, or if it's an airline or something, because this allows us to try to improve our effectiveness on safety promotion and target the correct audience. So happy with anonymous, but if you could, we invite you to write at least your organization or the stakeholder you are, if you are a pilot or if you are an airline, etc. So there's another question about the requirements to perform low visibility approaches in the in the current regulation, because we are still 24. The former regulation, we always had to do like to the lowest minima. Everything was to the lowest minima. And now in AMC 1, SPA-LOW is 120, and generally speaking, in the new regulatory framework, in SPA-LOW is 120. We've been flexibilizing, or we have more flexibility. The operator has a little bit more flexibility to not always need to do all the approaches, all the low visibility takeoffs, etc., to the very lowest minima. We have opened a little bit the wording. I am telling you, not all the approaches and not all the low visibility operations have this flexibility that I am going to describe now, but many of them we try to flexibilize a little bit and to allow the operator to remove the need to always be to the lowest minima, because sometimes it's more tricky for the pilot in training to do a go around like 50 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet above the decision height than at the decision height, because all the pilots are waiting for the decision height, and just in the decision height is when I'm going to go around, or when I have a problem in the low visibility takeoff is always to the minimum, etc. So we try to provide a little bit more flexibility because we think this is good for the pilot to try to accommodate the training to the real operation. Normally, if you have a problem in a low visibility operation, it's not going to be just on the minima. So we try to be more realistic and approach a little bit closer to the real operation. So this question from the anonymous, thank you very much for your question, is a little bit open. I cannot tell you a cut, but generally speaking, I could say, generally speaking, that yes, the lowest approved RDR is being flexibilized. It has more visibility, more flexibility than before. So I hope it's clear. Please don't hesitate to ask again about this if my explanation was not clear. John, can we clean up this? Okay, we have 4 more minutes. Maybe we can, let me check. Can you write Norman D'Amato?
That one?
Yeah, thank you. So Norman, thank you very much for your question. Would you be publishing an ECA briefing such as was done in fuel management? Okay, this is all-weather operation webinar.
Well, we've done our own guide.
But yeah, that's what I'm wanted to say. So I guess you are saying I read the ECA briefing for fuel management. Of course, we are in a webinar of all-weather operation. We are not exactly in the fuel webinar. However, I can say that regarding all-weather operation, we have an all-weather operation implementation manual. At the moment, it's in draft. If I may, it's very easy to locate. So give me 1 second. So if you go, if you go to Google and you write all-weather operation implementation manual, there, you can see that you have, at the moment it's draft. I hope that on the 1st of November it will be official. We've been working a lot on this, and you have, like, again, it's not as short as the ECA document for fuel. Obviously, this is for all-weather operation because we are in a webinar of all-weather operation. But you can download here. I don't know why in my screen it shows a very weird picture here, but normally it's probably something because of my computer. You will have a logo here, and you can download the all-weather operation implementation manual. You can you have questions and answers, etc. It's a little bit bigger again than the other one, and soon on the 1st of November, 3rd of November, whatever, we expect to have now a all-weather operation implementation manual version 1. And it's already, I already consulting with the experts. I am waiting for the GAC France to respond to a particular matter, and the document is ready. Again, it's not exactly like the all-weather operation, like the ECA document. It's a bit longer and a little bit more technical, let's say. But I hope it's good for you. Regarding fuel. We are starting a task force because we already have the task force all-weather operation. You know, Bo, you have Stefano Prola, Thierry, etc. We have this task force that has been working for the last 1 year or 1 year and a half, first on the regulation and now in the implementation material. So this group was already established. We are establishing a group for fuel under the SPT 097. I hope that by the 1st of November we have the group started, and we are expecting to start under EPAS 2023, meaning that we will start on the first quarter 2023 to develop material, WebEx, webinars, etc. And one of the elements that you can see in 097 is instead of an all-weather operation implementation manual, a fuel implementation manual, I'll call it whatever, fuel schemes implementation manual, and we will try to provide this data or this document. On the meantime, I suggest that you look at not only ECA, but other documents from the industry. IATA also has some documentation about it, etc. For fuel, and we are expecting to have another webinar in the first quarter 2023, correct, John, on fuel? I think it's somewhere in January.
24th of January.
Okay, so I hope that I can give you more information, Norman, at that time on regards to fuel management. Okay. And this is the last question before we break. Anonymous, don't you think the amount of Article 71(1) exemption requested by the operators could lead in a general situation where part of the operators work with all rules and part of the operators work with so this is a very political sensitive question, but I am willing to reply on behalf of the agency. At the moment, 24/10/2022, we have a very limited number of Article 71s. We discussed with the authorities because during the summer we saw that operators were very busy, and we thought that it was very difficult. It would be very difficult for them to implement on the 30th of October. The reality is that we haven't received many. Now Gregory from Luxembourg is telling me that Luxembourg will send a few. Bo, I think, I don't know, you are from the Swedish authority, but I remember only two from you, no? Only two operators, if I remember well. I think I remember one from Austria and not many more.
Not that many, that's true.
Correct. The Luxembourg colleagues are going to send probably this week their approval. I know TUI, I was talking to TUI as well and other operators, and they are considering. At the moment, nothing is official, so I cannot say. The other day in the webinar, TUI already said that in the second webinar. Also, DHL commented that they may do an Article 71. At the moment, there's nothing official, and maybe in the next webinar in next year we can provide kind of some numbers for the industry, but we are not seeing so many at the moment. There's still 6 days to go, but we haven't seen many. I know that I don't know if we have a Spanish representative here, but the discussions that we had with the Spanish representatives are that there's not going to be anyone there in Spain. I think France commented as well that they're not going to have any Article 71s. So regarding this question, we don't see that we're going to see a big proportion of these operators. So it's going to be very limited amount of operators. And basically, in the new regulation, you are allowed to go below the current regulation. So, you know, it's a little bit a pity that those operators that are under the exemption, they will not have the credits that they have, because all and we impose certain conditions for the Article 71. There's not going to be any benefit to be in the old regulation, and you will have no benefits in terms of minima. And all the minimas and the improved minimas are all in the new regulation. So there's not going to be any competitive disadvantage to those operators that have implemented the new regulation against the other ones. It's going to be probably the opposite. The ones that are in the Article 71, they will have a more penalizing regulatory framework. So I stop here. And we will continue answering questions. We have 10 minutes, I think, for the agenda. You can download the agenda in the in the website. So I think that we will come back in 5 minutes at 10 past. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, welcome to the second part. I hope that you have time for a coffee. We're going to continue now with another presentation. It's kind of the stakeholder overview now. Olivier Busson is going to, I don't know if I am pronouncing it correctly, Olivier, but Busson. He's French national. He's from Dassault, so thank you again, Dassault, for allowing us this presentation. He's been 23 years, almost 24 years in Dassault as a system engineer, and he was first initially with military aircraft and now in the Falcon jets. He is, for us, it was fundamental to develop the regulatory framework of EFVS, both at certification level in the CSEC2, but also in the ops domain, because well, he's the head behind and the expert behind, together with his colleague Richard, behind this regulatory update on EFVS. So thank you, Olivier, for being here with us. He's going to present us and provide a presentation of EFVS operations. So we see your presentation, Olivier, so we are ready to go. The floor is yours. Thank you for coming.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Francisco. So my presentation is about EVS operation. It is in two parts. So first, what are the privilege and the benefit of the EVS operations? And second, how to get these credits for the operator aerodromes and so on. So what about the EVS operation? First of all, the EVS operation is based on a camera, a performant camera that will provide a visual advantage over natural vision in the head-up display or equivalent. And EVS operation is also based on a straight-in instrument approach procedure and requires vertical guidance on board, and EVS will provide extension of the visual segment as explained by Francisco before. The main privilege of the EVS operation is the fact that the EASA grants a credit of RVR to operators that are capable of this kind of EVS operation, and the amount of the credit is typically 1/3, but it may be more depending on what has been demonstrated during certification of the aircraft. This credit of RVR is applicable to landing operating minima, and it can be used for two purposes. So first is the flight planning. It allows to select closer destination or alternate aerodrome. And it's also usable during the approach to authorize to descend below the approach band, and that we call the privilege of going to sea at the DH. Compared to what is existing now, EASA offers now 3 types of EVS with ops credit operation with different level of privilege and also different level of effort for the operators. So in the middle, we have the EVS-A, which is a new name for the EVS with operational credit operation that was mentioned in the CSAO 1. Its equivalent, and now has been added an EVS 200 operation on the left and the EVS to land operation on the right. So in EVS 200 operation, it's allowed to operate in the unrestricted Cat 1 domain, which means down to RVR of 550 meters and in 8 of 200 feet, where natural vision is required. And in EVS to land, the approach can be continued down to the ground without natural vision acquisition. So EVS 200, which is defined in for CAT NCC and part SPO in the magic numbers 312 for CAT and 235 for NCC, and the same for SPO. This EVS 200 operations offer easier access for air operator to EVS with ops credit operation, while the EVS to land operation offers more performance to to operators, considering that natural vision is no longer requested at 100 feet, and it offers also more simpler procedure for the crew due to this acquisition of natural vision, which is not required, which is no longer required at Saint-Pierre. For EVS 200, there is no ops-specific approval that is required, and it's the case for the EVSA and EVSL. An ops approval, specific approval, is required through Part SPA, according to Part SPA. I want to draw out the fact that the ops credit of RVR is maximum 1/3 for the EVS 200. It's limited to 1/3. It may be less depending on what has been stated in the AFM. And for EVSA and EVSL, more credits are possible, again, depending on what has been demonstrated. So 2 examples for this privilege of EVS. The first example is related to EVS 200, and the second one is related to EVS-A. First is on Antwerp, and the second in Le Bourget. These 2 airports are Cat 1 airport with reduced approach lighting, which has for consequence relatively high RVR. And with EVS, the EVS 200 for Antwerp authorized to operate in RVR 600 meters compared to 900 meters for category C aircraft. And EVS allows the crew to descend from 300 feet down to 200 feet using EVS, provided reference cues are visible in the image at the DH. And for Le Bourget, the EVS ops credit allows to operate in 400 meters of RVR compared to 750 with an EVS-A operation. And for the DH, the pilot is able to continue from 200 feet down to 100 feet with such operation, provided visual reference are seen in the EVS. And for the latest case, Le Bourget, of course, LVP must be enforced as we are in LVO. RVR is 400 meters, which is below 550 meters. Okay, now what are the benefits that are associated with this privilege, the RVR ops credit? There are 2 major benefits associated to EVS operation. It increases the efficiency of the operations in degraded weather conditions, it increases safety, and it reduces the environmental impact. So with respect to efficiency, EVS operation will increase the accessibility, which is good for local economy or for medical evacuation, for example. It will also reduce the indirect cost associated to the rerouting of passengers in low-vis operation. So these 2 points are more for the air operator, and the following 4 points are more from a strategic point of view for ANSP or the state. They are very interesting. So it will extend all existing 3D instrument approaches and will supplement the PBNER implementation in Europe. It will, of course, open the door for low-vis operation at other than Cat 2-3 aerodrome. This is true for EVSA and EVSL. It will unlock the capacity of the dense European network of secondary aerodrome, of course, and it even relieves the pressure on up during peak of low-vis operation. The safety, so the EVS will boost situational awareness, especially when it is combined with SVS in what we call a combined vision system. And this will increase safety of margin. And this is true for all phases of flight, not only during the approach. It's true for climb, for descent, for cruise, for taxi. And the last point, but not the least, EVS has a positive impact on environmental footprint because it allows to define closer alternate, and this results in less fuel intake. And during the approach, EVS will limit the number of go-around, it will shorter the delay, and it will also reduce the number of diversion. All these benefits of the EVS operation concern all the aviation community, concern the air operator, the aerodrome operator, but also the ANSP and the state for the more strategic benefits. And I will finish the part about the benefit by saying that the current fleet of aircraft equipped with EVS is estimated in 2022 to more than 3,020 aircrafts, most being BizJet for the time being. Okay, second part of the presentation, how to get the EVS privilege. So in order to promote the EVS operation and to support the deployment of this operation, EASA is working on a guidance material, and this guidance material will be produced for each user of the EVS operation. So we have air operator, we have aerodrome operator, ANSP, ATC, and the state of the aerodrome, which can play a key role in the operation through the AIP and also through the promulgation of some aerodrome for that operation, as it is for Cat 2, 3, and so on. All these materials, such as EASA implementation manual, which Francisco spoke about a few minutes ago, the checklist, all this material will be made available through EASA master web page under the EASA community network. And we will have also a section dedicated to user feedback regarding EVS operation. So let's make a zoom in on the air operator. The air operator has to go through 4 major items when you want to use EVS operation. So the aircraft certification, the crew competence, the operator approval, and the aerodrome and the instrument approach procedure or suitability. So for EVS 200, the aircraft has to be certified either as an EVS A or an EVS to land system. Regarding the crew competence, the operator has to define the training for the PF and the PM, and the PF and the PM has to be trained for such operation. So we have standard items here. We have initial training checking, recurrent checking, recent experience and differences. Of course, the OSD can be used to take credit of some operation and EVS. With respect to operator approval, the CAT operator have to describe this new operation EVS 200 in their AOC. And for NCC and SPO, this new operation has to be declared in the declaration. And of course, the operator has to define the operating procedure, MEL, maintenance program, monitoring of the operation performance indicator, and also operating minima has to be updated for EVS operation. And regarding aerodrome and AIP, of course, the runway has to be checked as suitable for that operation. That's the purpose of the next slide. Wanted to highlight some points regarding the legacy EVS. So what we call legacy EVS is an EVS with ops credit that has been certified before the 1st of January 2022. It's a system that has been certified according to the AO 1, and this system are acceptable for EVS 200 operation for CAT, NCC, and SPO, but their use requires an approval from the competent authority. That's the first point. For part SPA, the legacy system may be certified as an EVS with operational credit, as I explained, and such system may be considered as suitable for EVSA operation. Of course, requirements are quite similar. And for CAT, the EVS 200 operation shall be described in the AOC. I already mentioned that point, and for NCC and SPO, the operation shall be notified in the declaration. I reminded here the article of the regulation related to that. So yes, this slide is about the suitability of the runways for EVS operation. So there are requirements to be satisfied. I mentioned that in this slide, the reference of the AMC that clarify what is required to be checked. So for EVS 200, there are many items to be verified. First, the operator has to verify the impact of LED system on the visual advantage. This is done according to the IFM and the system that has been certified. For the instrument approach procedure, the operator has to verify the straight-in approach has been designed in accordance with the PANOPS Volume 2 or equivalent, for example, the TERPS. And he has also to verify that the vertical path and the lateral offset are consistent with what is written in the AFM. And for EVS 200, the lateral offset is limited to a maximum of 3 degrees. There is also a key point about the obstacle to ensure that clearance regarding obstacle is appropriate for EVS operation. So the operator has to check that there is either an OFZ, which can be very useful for approaches with DH down to 250 feet. And for the approaches with higher DH, the VSS has to be checked. It shall not be penetrated by obstacle to authorize EVS operation. It has also to be checked that no obstacle requires visual identification. And regarding the go-around, the bulk landing, which is performed below the published DAH in the EVS segment, the operator has to check that either there is an OFZ or there is a climb gradient that is consistent with the instrument departure procedure. For example, alternate procedure can be defined, and everything is described in the AMC. For EVS approach, additional verification has to be made. The TDZ RVR sensor must be available because it's requested below RVR 550 meters for LVO operation. And it has also to be checked that appropriate LVP for landing, low-vis procedure, have been established for that operation. And usually the switchover time is part of LVP, but if it's not, it has to be checked that the switchover time is 1 second or less for EVS operations. And at least for EVS to land operation, the terrain profile prior to threshold has to be verified to be consistent with flare domain that has been certified. And it's the same for the runway profile. As the flare is requested for EVS to land, the operator has to verify that the runway profile is consistent with the domain that has been certified. So most of this information are expected to be available in the IP. I mentioned the different section where you are supposed to find this information. Of course, we are at the beginning, so all this information will be not available tomorrow. It will take time for that. What I'd like to mention here is the fact that if a runway has been promulgated as suitable for EVS by the state of the aerodrome, for example in the AIP, then the red items that are mentioned in the slide do not need to be verified by the air operator. and the service provider, the aeronautical data service provider, may also play a key role on that aspect. And Cat 2, Cat 3 runway, of course, is considered as suitable for EVS 200, EVS-A, and also EVS to land operation, as LVP have been established, the PATC is available, and so on. So, in conclusion, I'd like to give you some key takeaway and good practice, maybe some insight for the deployment of the EVS operation. First of all, with respect to aerodrome operator, so they have to update the IP as soon as possible with the EVS information that are requested by the regulation. So, for example, the presence of LED on approach lighting system, the non-penetration of the VSS, the presence of webset, and so on, the LVP also. And the aerodrome operator should also think to upgrade their certificate with EVS operation in accordance with the regulation to ease the deployment of that operation and to be more efficient in the deployment of the operation, avoiding each air operator to contact the aerodrome and to look for the adequate information for safe operation. So it would be great to have this in mind. The aerodrome operator has also to account for EVS in the NOTAM when appropriate. It's really important for operation. And they have also to take the opportunity to verify the validity of the description of the lighting system, because sometimes what is in the AIP is not reliable, is not relevant, is not the same as what we can observe in real life. The second point is a key role that aeronautical information service provider may play in the deployment of the EVS operation. First, they have to establish aerodrome operating minima reflecting EVS privilege of each operator. So, for example, EVS 200, EVS-A, EVS-L, depending on the authorization of each operator, but they can be much more than that. They could also propose a service verifying the suitability of the aerodrome according to the EVS regulation. That the red item I mentioned in my previous slides, all these items could be checked by the service provider for the community. And with respect to air operator and also the dispatcher, we encourage them to declare the EVS RVR capacity in the flight plan. This can be done through the field 18 by mentioning EVS RVR 350 meters, for example. And they are also encouraged to take credit of RVR for the selection of the aerodrome, the alternate, and the destination. And at least we recommend to use EVS procedure as much as possible in day-to-day 3D operation where vertical guidance is available. And for all users, we recommend to share the feedback about EVS operation in the new section that will be available on the EASA website. Thank you. And I want just to mention the fact that an EVS survey about the EVS operation is available on eBay side, and it can be fulfilled till the end of the month, as far as I remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. A wonderful presentation. I'm going to take control and share my presentation now. The presentation is a quick update on the regulatory framework for suitability of runways last operational demonstration. We already did this presentation in the first or second webinar, if I remember well. Remember that at that time we explained that we need we wanted to, as much as possible, reduce or remove the operational demonstration that today we have for CAT2 and CAT3. We have a question about CAT2, CAT3 and EFVS. Why now we need a suitability of runways, a study of suitability of runways for EFVS. Remember that we have EFVS-L now and etc. So it's quite a bit different from the old EVS operation. But anyway, we will answer this question later. The idea was to reduce or remove the operational demonstration as much as possible, because this improves availability of aerodromes and prepare the future technologies of auto land. We did a concept that was published in ED Decisions 012/2022. You have this available, and again, it will be applicable from the 30th of October. The idea is that with 90% of the runways will be covered by either the previous operational data or the desktop assessment, because those runways are within the 90% of the certification assumptions. And then for the other 10, again, we will use this kind of 3-step process and see how it goes. We're going to focus today on the operational demonstration, which I will detail in a second. This suitability of runways have new ideas, like now in this concept, we can allow grandfathering of other aircraft models, meaning other aircraft types, subject to manufacturer's statement. Thierry will explain a little bit more on this. And then the assessment of the airport is through the AFM data, and the whole desktop assessment, the comparison between the airport data and the AFM data, which in the CS issue 2 will have a much more detail and will provide more assumptions and provide the assumptions of the test campaign, let's say, which is new. And then if nothing of the two works, is the operational assessment. And here is a little bit traditional, but I think we have did some improvement or at least provide more clarity on the idea of this. So remember that this was done through a task force with many people of the industry, and that's what I highlighted in my previous presentation. And when answering the questions, we have a task force on all-weather operations, and thanks to this task force, we are developing all the documentation, these webinars, etc. So in the AMC, in the GM1, as part of this 110, we explained the AMC1, no, in detail. I mean, like with a picture, with a diagram. And remember that the idea is that we will have operational data. If it's successful and you can operate and you fly there. If you don't, then you try to do the desktop assessment. Again, if it's successful, then you operate. If it's not successful, the desktop assessment, you have an alternate assessment. Or if the desktop assessment is at all correct, I mean, it doesn't match with the runway with the AFM data, then you will need to go to the operational assessment, and if successful, you operate, and if not, then that means that you cannot operate LDO. So the operational demonstration is covered, and that's going to be the presentation of, and this is my last introductory slide before we go into Thierry's Airbus presentation. This is covering the AMC1 SPALOVIS 110 point Juliet to Oscar. And the purpose of the operational demonstration is to ensure or to validate the effectiveness of the aircraft systems and the operator procedures for the intended operation in that specific instrument, flight procedure and runway. Now there's a need to have a process to determine the number, because before there was 100 approaches, and then for every new runway was one approach only. But for all runways was at least one, but you didn't have the other credits that I mentioned about the previous operational data. Well, the previous operational data was half allowed, and then you didn't have the desktop assessment. So now operational demonstration is not necessarily 100 to start with, and not necessarily only one approach when you need to do an operational demonstration. So it's much more performance-based. And sometimes in some particular runways you may need to go above one approach, but that will be explained a little bit more with Thierry. The conditions to perform the operational demonstration before was Cat 1 conditions. Now we have a little bit more flexibility from if you are Cat 2 already approved, then you can use Cat 2 conditions to do the Cat 3. For Cat 2 and Cat 3, obviously, you need Cat 1. And for SA Cat 1 and SA Cat 2, which is the old OTS Cat 2 and the kind of old LTS Cat 1, you also need Cat 1. For EFVS A and EFVS L, you need EVS condition, meaning EVS with no operational credit. That means you need to fly the instrument approach as normal, okay? We have a number of alleviations for the operational demonstration. I already mentioned about that you have the previous operational data and you have the desktop assessment. And in fact, in the previous operational data, you can also use other types. So it's a double alleviation, no? But also there's other alleviations. You can do commercial flight. That was most of the cases. It was already that alleviation in the previous regulation. But also you can do simulations with your manufacturer or in the FSTD subject to conditions, okay? So I think with all this introductory overview of the operational demonstration, we can start the presentation from Thierry. Let me 1 second because I need to disconnect. Thierry, if you are there, please start trying to share and connect your camera. And I'm going to introduce Thierry Bourret. Thierry is an Airbus aeronautical, is an engineer from Airbus. He's been in Airbus for a long time. Let me check how many years, but it's 22 years or almost 23 years in Airbus. He's been in many different, let's say, parts of in Airbus. What I can say is that now he's an expert in system. For the last 10, 15 years, he's an expert on the automatic pilot expert. And fundamentally, for us, he was a key expert for the development of CS issue 2 in regards to the auto land and all this. And for ops, for the operational assessment and in generally speaking for the suitability of runways, he was a key expert. So Thierry, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. The presentation is available. We can see it. So the floor is yours, Thierry.
Okay, thank you. So my presentation will focus on how to do operational assessment. First, I will introduce you when we should do it and the general principle of how we do it. I want to highlight the general principle of scale the effort that we introduce in this guidance material, saying that doing just one may be enough for some kind of runway, but maybe for a very complex runway, one is not enough, and maybe one is too much if the runway is very simple. And we will explain how we determine this complexity on the runway based on the existing guidance, and we'll illustrate this by a concrete example. And we will finish our presentation with some criteria to determine how successful is an operational assessment, which is also part of the guidance material. So when to use operational assessment? I would say to make it simple, when there is no other option available, which has been said in the introduction. So there are 3 other options. One is previous operational data, one desktop assessment, one equivalence approved, and I will highlight how this could be failed. Previous operational data, you may not have record of previous operation on an airport on a specific runway. For example, if one of your runway is only a diversion airport, that will not count because you probably don't have any experience there. Maybe your aircraft type you want to get credit, you don't have any past experience of this particular aircraft type, and the aircraft type model extension is not allowed by the aircraft manufacturer or by default by the regulation. Or you may have experience on a particular airport runway, but using a different aircraft system than the one you intend to use from now. For example, in the past you've been using automatic landing without head-up, and now you want to take credit of head-up display and EVS to get new credit. So all your past experience doesn't really match with what you intend to do. Desktop assessment could fail for many reasons. I believe the most probable reason for desktop assessment being failed is that you don't have the data available. It's not in the FM because it was an old aircraft, and the aircraft manufacturer is not here to support you, unfortunately. It could be also data missing from the airport side, or any kind of data which is not available. And then you have equivalents which are approved, so you can escape operational assessment if your aircraft manufacturer performs a simulation for you on this particular runway, or you have another design organization that approves this kind of operation on this particular runway with this particular airport and aircraft type. Or you could also use a full flight simulator provided it's suitable for the assessment. So if none of these options are available, then you come into the operational assessment. General principle is that we need to identify the risk on this particular runway based on your particular system you intend to use. In the guidance material, I want to explain detail later on. We will provide you guidance on how to assess this risk based on known system, which is so far has been mainly the automatic landing system. If you intend to use other systems, there may be some other risks that you need to consider. And the second general principle is that you need to agree the methodology with your competent authority. It's, I would say, a general methodology that you need to agree, not a case-by-case basis. You need to agree the way to identify the risk and the way to perform the assessment. And again, the guidance provides you some guidelines on how to define an appropriate methodology. So what is the principle of scale the effort? So to make it simple, we have identified 3 levels of complexity: simple, moderate, complex, very complex. And based on this identified complexity, we have suggested a number of flights to perform the assessment. So as you can see, it's very simple. You can escape a real flight. If it's moderate, you do need to do at least one, which was, I would say, the basic previously in the prior regulation. And we have identified complex and very complex with more flight required. Also, the conditions in which you can perform those flights differ depending on the complexity. So, for example, if you do a moderate only one flight, then you can do that in commercial flight. If it's more complex, you need a designated pilot and a defined procedure to perform this assessment. And for the very complex case, you shouldn't do that in commercial operation for the first flights on this particular runway. Of course, this is only guidance material, so there is always room for discussion. If you are in the border between moderate and complex, maybe you can adjust, go from 1 to 3, maybe do 2 or whatever is relevant, and it's agreed with your authorities. So how to determine the complexity of a particular runway? So based on the automatic known system, automatic landing system, we have derived some, I would say, standard set of criteria that can be used. Of course, those can be adapted to your specificity of the system you intend to use, the specificity of your aircraft based on the available data. The two main criteria that has been identified to assess the complexity of the runway is the pre-threshold terrain runway profile and the landing area slope that contains two components, the mean slope and the deviation from landing area slope. Because we know that significant variation of slope in the landing area creates a lot of complexity for the landing systems. So on these two axes, we have developed some criteria to identify if it's simple, moderate, complex, or very complex. And then you can do an overall assessment of the complexity of the runway. Some criteria that are included in the guidance material can be relaxed if it can be justified. And just a small example, for example, if you have a very small aircraft that flares at very low height, for example, 20 feet, then of course the pre-threshold terrain profile is irrelevant because it's not even used by the aircraft system prior 20 feet, which you should be on the runway when this occurs, and therefore this criteria is not applicable to your particular aircraft. So in the guidance material, I would say it's here as a reference, but can be adapted based on your particular aircraft type. So let's take an example. I pick an example at Stockholm, and I start by the landing area slope. So this is the runway profile of this particular runway, 01 left. In the guidance material, it is said that you should consider the first 600 meters after the runway threshold as part of the landing area slope. That needs to be considered, and you can see that on this particular example, the landing area slope is close to 0.1%. It's pretty flat, and there are no significant variation of slope in this particular from 0 to 600 meters after threshold. So if you consider the criteria of the guidance material which is existing, you will assess this runway as very simple as far as the runway slope is concerned, because you meet the simple criteria. Now, if you look at the runway profile before this runway end, this is what is in the charts. The guidance materials tells you to consider at least 300 meters prior to runway threshold, unless otherwise specified, which means depending on your particular aircraft type, what the FM states, or what any other involved party can say, maybe you may need to extend it or to reduce it, but this is the default value that needs to be considered. If you look at the at the details of the criteria for this assessment of the pre-runway threshold, so the simple criteria is something which would be very, very flat, which is not the case here on this particular example. So you will not meet the simple criteria. And the moderate criteria, you are allowed to have a rising slope of 7%, which I've drawn here as a dashed line. And you can see that you will pass this moderate criteria. And therefore, for this particular approach, using the criteria which is inside the guidance material, you will end up with a moderate complexity for this particular runway. So I've assessed the pre-threshold as moderate, the landing area as simple. I need also to consider any potential other identified factor that would change my initial assessment. I've looked at the IAP. There is nothing special mentioned about low visibility operation or any complexity related to Cat 2 and Cat 3 operation. So I will have no factor that will change my initial assessment. So considering all those cases, all those assessments, I will consider my runway as I would say moderate. And this will allow me to do only one flight in commercial operation to assess the compatibility of my system with these particular examples. Of course, I can do that only if I have a plan which is agreed with the competent authority. So to do this assessment, I would have used only the default value in the guidance material. Then on this Same example, I could have a second case where I have in-service experience, for example, on my main base where I do a regularly low visibility operation. And on this main base, I know that the runway, the pre-threshold runway is slightly differ from the standard which is in the guidance material. I've drawn this line in dash line. I know this runway, it works because I have previous experience on this runway, of a runway that has this type of profile. I use the same aircraft type on this particular runway for which I have a previous experience, and I can use that as a criteria to determine if it's simple or not. So if I have this experience, I could determine myself that this runway is much more simpler than the one I have experience with, and therefore I will fall in the simple case. So if I have this data available, this would be my assessment. Pre-threshold is simple, landing area slope is simple. No other factor identified, therefore this will be a simple case for which I could escape from doing a regular flight on this particular case. Of course, this methodology needs to be agreed with authorities. So this is just an example to illustrate how you will determine the complexity of the runway. And there are a lot of details in the guidance material. Last item I want to talk about today is how to determine if an assessment is successful or not. In the guidance material, there are some details about what needs to be recorded to assess this successful operation. So in particular, you need to have the wind condition, the touchdown point. It can be observation, but it's better if it's recorded in a digital format. And then you need pertinent landing parameters to assess the success of the operation. So typically you could use a flight data recorder to make this recording, or something which is equivalent, or you could use a photo or video recording of the instrument panel or the outside view to be able to reassess the landing you have performed during this assessment. And the data that you are going to be to record and the way to assess if it's successful or not, this also needs to be agreed with the authorities. There are a lot of details in the guidance material that helps you to determine what is a successful landing or an unsuccessful landing. And all this also needs to be part of the plan agreed with the authorities. So the guidance material gives you a basic, but you can adapt it based on your particularity, on the data you are available, and you're adapted to your particular aircraft type you intend to use. And that's it for my presentation, and it's time for question, I think.
Well, thank you very much, Thierry. We're going to take a coffee break of 10 minutes according to the agenda. Again, the agenda is available on the website. At 10 past, we're going to come back for the questions. We're going to have a panel of all the presenters that we have today, plus some others that I will introduce, Vasilis, Carl, Richard. So I will make a short introduction. So I see you guys all at 10 past in 10 minutes time for the questions and answer session. Thank you very much. Ciao. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the third part of the webinar. It's a session on, let me share the agenda with you guys so we know where we are. We are in the third part here, starting at 15 past 10. So we're going to have a panel discussion and questions from the audience. Generally speaking, I would like to highlight to the panelists, the one that had more votes, which is this question from Rolf Roysen. I will not start with this one. Just I'm going to recap first and present all the panelists, and then go to this one from David ICV GM4. But I would like to invite the panelists in the meantime to read the question and think a little bit about this question, because I think it's a question that received most votes and we need to start answering. So about the airport assessment, Jepsen, etc. It's a pity because in the previous workshop we had Jepsen, etc. and NavBlue and and Lido with us. If I wouldn't know that we have this question, then I would invite them. It's a pity, but we will try to answer that. So you guys know most of the panelists today because I already presented Thierry, Olivier, and Bo. I would like to introduce Vasilis. Vasilis, welcome. Vasilis is our expert. Stop me if I am wrong, Vasilis, but Vasilis is our expert in airline regulation. He's been here more than 10 years, and before that he was working in Greece, in the airport there. He has developed and helped us on the update of all-weather operation. This regulation was applicable since the 1st of August, and also he has deep knowledge on the IP regulation that he did with Manolis. So thank you, Vasilis, for coming. Welcome. We have also Carl. Carl, we don't have your camera. Carl Garvey, I guess you know him as well from previous webinars. He's our expert from certification. He's been, again, many years in EASA, more than 10 years in EASA. He's a regulations officer like me, so rule making. Also in the field of certification. He was the main coordinator for the CS issue 2. And again, as I said, his background on aeronautical engineer and a specialist in an expert in certification. Thank you for joining us. I also have with us Richard Enson. He's also from Dassault. So double thanks to Dassault for this. Richard was before, he started his career in the French Ahmed El Air, so Air Force. Now I think you guys have called it under space. Recently, it was a change in the Air Force of France. After that, he spent quite more than 20 years, and then after that, he joined Dassault Aviation. He's there for more than 15 years. Probably your expertise, Richard, is more like the operational suitability data expert, if I am correct. But he helped us for many years on the development of this regulation, especially on the EFVS, on the non-commercial, so in the NCC part. So if we have business jet operators with us, please don't hesitate to make questions about non-commercial, because we have the right experts. So Richard, welcome. Can you hear us fine? No, we don't hear you. Okay, on the meantime, because Olivier, Richard is not, while he fixed, I wanted to ask to Dassault, maybe I later on I give you an offset question as well. Before we start, Olivier and Richard, what is the status of the technology of EFVS, generally speaking, today? Because I think it's been some time here. What is the future, or where you see this technology in the context of the aviation at this moment?
Okay, thank you, Francisco. An easy question. I think we have made lots of progress since the beginning of the EVS. So EVS has been introduced at the beginning of 2000, and I think that now we are at the middle, and in the future there may be some improvement for the EVS, not to replace the EVS, but more to supplement the EVS technology we have now, and which is already performant.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I try to always, when I start the panel, to start with a very generic question. Sometimes I spoke about even about basketball or something, just to break the ice between all of us. And Thierry, welcome again. Thank you for joining us in this panel. Again, I'm going to make a very generic question. You know, what do you expect for in Airbus about generally about the operational credits? It's a very general question, you know, that where you come from and where you expect, you know, your company or in general the sector to be seen regarding the operational credit, where we are in this race, let's say.
So as Richard has said, EVS for us at Airbus, we are going to develop a EVS system. It's in the project, but we don't expect this to be generalized on our aircraft because it supposes a lot of investment to add a head-up display on the current fleet. However, we believe that the special Cat 1 operation would be that our aircraft can support special Cat 1 operation. We still need to do the demonstration for that, but that's a possibility for our aircraft to develop operational credit, besides the standard Cat 2, Cat 3, which is existing for years.
Thank you, thank you. So now that we break a little bit the ice, I will start with the first question to the audience. Remember, guys, I will really like if someone study a little bit the second, from the second one that from Rolfsen. I have some ideas as well that we could answer on this regard, but let's start first with Davide ICV, GM4 SPALO-VIS 100, which state provides or is planning to provide previous operational data for airport suitability. I think this obviously we don't have Karsten and other experts from the task force. He's probably referring to this idea that we impose also in SPALO-VIS 110 about the list of airports and about, you know, the restriction both in the previous operational data and in other places in which we say about you know, the airport, the country, the airport authority. Is anybody willing to answer this one, or I kick in, because I would like to say something about the GM4. Is any of the panelists willing to ready to answer this, or I answered? Especially to Bob, because the manufacturers are not, you know, experts on this matter. But I would like to say that there are states like the USA, and correct me if I'm wrong on this matter, Bo. There are states like USA that provide a list of suitability of airports. More than a list, they provide the ones that are not suitable, let's say, or they are difficult, or they are outside, let's say, outside the norm. And they provide a detailed list of that. This list, we mentioned this in a GM. I don't know if it's, I think it's in SPALO-VIS 110, but it's in this direction to that FAA, for example, is one of the authorities. In regards to the Europe, we are talking to all the member states, because this is a responsibility of the member states. So we are not sure if we could, you know, kind of provide and help the member states in order to be more transparent with this. I know Germany, especially Karsten, they know which airports are, let's say, a little bit more difficult in Germany than others. So as I said, as a reference, I will use now FAA, that they have an active list available for you guys. And we mentioned not maybe in GM4, but in 110, there's a GM, and if you search for FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, you will see that we are stating that. So anything to add, Bo, on this regard on GM4?
Just to confirm that you're absolutely correct in saying to say about FAA, and of course they do have the benefit of being one authority that covers so many aerodromes, and they have everything in one particular organization. That doesn't mean it's perfect and or without problems, I understand, but it's to compare that with about 194 or something, 93 different authorities around the world, different ICAO member states, with each having their authorities, and sometimes the authorities may not be the same for ops, and the aerodromes may not be under the same roof even. So that's, of course, this is where we want to go, and I think that looking at Thierry's presentation today, giving these criteria, I think that is that thing really makes me optimistic that we will be able to get further in this, and only isolate the few very problematic aerodromes, and then we are working actively, or will work rather. We try to get it started. ICAO still has to get started, but we will work together with the aerodrome specialists and see that we and airworthiness and try to get much closer. Thank you.
Thank you, Bo. I invite the panelists. We're now going to answer the question from Rolf, but I invite the panelists to see any question that they see in the Slido. Don't hesitate to tell me to answer one. So we're going to, John, can we move forward and answer the question from Rolfson? Thank you. So we're going to answer. I'm going to read for the audience. We cannot share, no, the slide with the people, or they can see the.
They should be able to see it in the.
Okay. Okay, so the question, I hope that you all see the question that we're going to answer. The whole airport assessment thing screams for a vendor to administer this data. He puts a lot of emoticons. And self-it decently.
Spell it.
Yeah, okay. So is Lido or Jepsen the lucky candidate? Or is the market still open for this? The idea to let very little operators to do this himself is just overwhelming and unfair. I don't know exactly what he's referring to. The things that you have an IP, you have a responsibility to follow the IP. And now we have provided much more data on this. On the airport, but this can be done, and I would like to talk to Thierry as well, because a part of this problem is related to the AFM, in the sense that you just need to check and cross-check the AFM data against the airport, or the airports against the AFM. So this plays a role. I'm going to start to give the floor to Thierry, and then I complement, and then maybe as well, Vasilis, you can mention something about the IP on this matter. So Thierry, the floor is yours.
Yes, so the question is very interesting. However, we want the rule to be rather generic and adapt to every aircraft system. And we don't want the, I would say, the airport's assessment to be aligned to the worst aircraft. Maybe the worst aircraft will be an F380, which is a very big aircraft, and we don't want this rule, which applies to an F380, to be applicable to BizJet, because it would make no sense. So yes, the assessment could be done once, but it needs to be done per aircraft type to be relevant. And therefore, whoever is doing the assessment, he will need data from the aircraft manufacturer to adapt the assessment based on what is declared and what is certified. So it's not easy to make a simple rule that will be applicable to any aircraft. This is why, okay, I understand the concern, but it would be very difficult, and we want the rules to be performance-based, because we want also to protect the future. Maybe in the future we'll have more advanced system that will alleviate the assessment and the constraint that are associated to today's known constraint. So we want the rule also to be flexible for future evolution. So it's not a bad idea, but in practical, it would be very difficult to do if you don't know exactly what has been certified.
Thank you. Vasilis, can you comment something about the difficulty Rolf is mentioned about the IP, that it may be difficult to gather the data, and then there's a second part of the question, which is what after you gather the data from the airport, how the assessment needs to be done and compared to the AFM. That I will answer that, but please, if you can mention and comment about the IP data.
Yes, thank you very much, Francisco. Well, for us as aerodrome operators, we are data originators, and we need to make sure that appropriate information is originated in order to be published in the AIP. Therefore, we have amended Regulation 373 of 2017. It refers to AIS, to our information services. So there is a new regulation that has been adopted, and is Regulation 2022 938, where we include information which is required to conduct the assessment. For example, the type of the navets available at the airport, and their performance, as we said, also the penetration of visual segment surfaces, if the aerodrome is approved for operation with operational credits, as well as especially for Cat 1 airports, which they are supporting SA Cat 1, the existence of radio altimeter operating area together, so they have a precision approach terrain chart, because there is a need to use a radio altimeter. So quite a number of information is available in the AP, and for us is the official publication. Now, how the data providers like Jefferson or Lido, they are combining this information, it's not for us, it's part of another regulation. But from aerodrome side, we make sure that this information is available, it can be used. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The second part, it will be that whenever you have the IP, then obviously you need to compare this with the AFM. I think in the future, we expect that the AFM is clear of what you need to check, because the assumption is going to be there. And we hope there's no, we think it's not very difficult, but of course, it depends on the level and the resources of the operator. A small operator is not the same like a big airline from a country. And we understand this. I can propose, Rolf, for example, we are doing a course on the 3rd of November to the American Authority. Unfortunately, it's in Spanish, so I cannot invite. I don't think you can participate. But we can do this type of courses. We're going to do this suitability of runways exercise in Santa Marta and in Cartagena de Indias and in some other airport in Colombia. To illustrate the competent authorities and the operators there. We could do this exercise, and maybe in the next webinar, what I need to do is maybe talk to a couple of operators and show you that in the IP is more or less easy. We can take some AFMs and see and demonstrate that if you want to subcontract this to Lido, Jepsen, or NAPLU, is fine. But it's not that difficult. You just need a little bit of time to go through the regulation, and we can help you there with maybe a 4th webinar in which we dedicate a session to analyze one airport and do all the process of the suitability of runways. I invite you, Rolf, to see especially the first and the second webinar, which is recorded. Maybe, John, you can remind that we have some records of the videos in.
So everything is on the event pages. So if you go to EASA events and then past events, you will find them all. And then we also link them eventually on the All Weather Ops page on the community site. Once that
we can do that. So we can do that. And I invite you to, Rolf, to see the second webinar and the first webinar where Valentin from DHL did a nice assessment of the suitability of runways, and maybe that helped. And I additionally going to consider to talk to my management to see if we could do a very clear example of one particular airport. Maybe we can use the Colombian one, so no member state in Europe could say that we are in favor of any of the member states, and do the exercise that we're going to do with the Colombian authority. Maybe do it with you guys live in a fourth webinar or in a fifth webinar. So I hope it's clear. The next one is from Javier. It's about EFVS. So maybe, Richard, this is going to be a little bit more for you. Maybe I can start with Javier. It's about training on EFVS, but let me start first with this. So more flexibility of there was another, there's another one from Javier. John, if you can, I want the one of training credits, okay?
Yeah.
So there are two questions from Javier. Both of them receive a lot of voting. So I'm going to read it. Maybe I can help as well on this matter. Can you put the training part? Oh, you already did. Okay, thanks. So are there any training credits for Captain recent experience or recurrent training, Captain 2, Category 2 and EFVS A, so EFVS approach? Please note that the captain operating both seats requires to perform 4 approaches, 2 and 2, for EFVS, plus 4 approaches for Cat 2 during the OPC period. Previously, it was 0 as per OSD. I think in the regulation, we clearly says at some point that, unless operational credit defined in the OSD, So, but I would like first to give the floor maybe to Richard and to answer this. And I remember that this question is somewhere in the SPALOVIS 120. I will need to check the AMC on the meantime, Richard. So while you start, I will look at in the regulation the AMCs related to SPALOVIS. The floor is yours. No, we have no sound. Okay. Otherwise, on the meantime, we no. Try. You keep trying until you do it. I'm gonna go to the other question, but you there and play and you interrupt me in the middle, no problem. So more flexibility for runways assessment is only partially true, as the current regulation only requires for Cat 3 and Cat 2. And now it is required as well for EFVS. And maybe, Olivier, we need to answer a little bit, Javier, regarding why we need a certain study on the EFVS, especially on the EFVS to land. Is EASA planning on creating an EU database per aircraft type, runway? What do we do with the PACT if it's not available, the precision approach terrain charts, if I am correct on this acronym, Vasilis? So I can answer first the question, but Olivier, maybe if you can prepare to explain a little bit why we need the EFVS, and I see Olivier, Thierry also willing to reply.
It's okay now?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
So, Richard, if we go to then the original question, now that you have replied,
yes.
Are there any time credits for Captain recent experience on regards to the OSD? Yeah?
Yes, it's easy to answer. In the law, there is no credit between Cat 2 and EVS. It's clear. But it's now it's a job to the manufacturer to develop through OSD process some kind of credits. But for example, for Dassault, we don't have credit in OSD between Cat 2 and EVS. But this question is very interesting because in the spirit of his operator, CAT2 and EVS both are LVO operation, but in reality it's totally different because to perform EVS and CAT2 is not the same technique. Yes, you are descending in low vis operation, but it's not exactly the same technique and the same skill to perform. And if an operator try to develop credits in the OSD, it will be very difficult with the OSD to find a very clear spirit. And for me, if we are qualified on CAT2 or CAT3, we use EVS only for awareness. I think EVS-A or EVS-L, it's in majority for operator without CAT2 or CAT3 qualification. And EVS, it's also to go on small aerodrome with no ILS CAT2, CAT3 installation. It's not the same kind of operator, but for business aircraft, it's very useful to have EVS qualification. A or L, if you have time to go to training and to perform ops approval. And if we don't have time, we can go to EVS 200 because it's a good result for small effort and to have a very good result for the day-to-day operation. It's clear?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Richard. I confirm to Javier that we also have the possibility on operational suitability data, both in the initial training. So the manufacturer could develop credits between EFVS initial training and CAT2, let's say, initial training, and also on the recurrent basis, not the checking part, but the recurrent part, which we refer to it as, if I remember well, recent experience or something like that, or competence, yeah, recent experience. You have places there about the operational suitability data, and it's just a matter of the manufacturer to develop these credits if available. Thierry, I don't know if you wanted to say this or we move to the next question.
No, nothing to add. I share exactly the same view as Richard.
Okay, thank you. So we move to the next question of Javier. Javier is having two questions at the same time, but he has many votes to this question. So let's go back to the flexibility of runway assessment. I don't know, for the two questions that we have here, EASA is planning of creating an EU database. No, officially, we are not planning to create an official database. We are talking to the member states, and this, as Bo said about the GM4, that's why I brought also GM4 forward, because I knew that there was a couple of questions regarding this. We could, in the future, maybe consider this. We need to talk to the member states. The responsibilities on the member states is not in EASA, but here we are always willing to help. And then this is a discussion that the competent authorities and EASA needs to have to see if we could potentially do a database. At the moment, it's not in the plans. However, there are some discussions about it, and as soon as the conclusions are finished and concluded, let's say, we will inform you. Regarding the pact and the precision approach terrain chart, what can you say about this, Vasilis? Do you have any tip?
Well, okay, for the precision approach terrain part, well, I don't know if you, you need to read also what we have in the aerodrome regulation and the AMC guidance material there. And in order to get, let's say, the approval as an aerodrome to allow this type of operation, you need also to provide the precision approach terrain chart. So the chart will be available for EFVS approach operations. If I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, well, and this is a little bit, he's talking about EFVS, he's talking about other ones as well. For SACAT1 as well, I think it is required, though I can't remember. So there are certain operational credit that requires the airport to have, and this is in the regulation of aerodromes, that whenever you want to authorize or allow operation on some of the operations, then you need to provide this one. And in addition, there are, as in the SPALOVIS 110, there's an AMC there where you can, as an operator, develop, if there's no availability on the IP, you could develop certain data for your own use as an equivalent to. I don't know if specifically the pact is one of them, but what I mean is that you have flexibility, a little bit of flexibility as an operator to develop some data, of course, approved by the competent authority, etc. So we have many mitigating measures to avoid Mickey Mouse data, but it is there. Thierry, and then Olivier. The floor is yours, Thierry.
Yes, maybe I can comment on what is the precision approach terrain chart is not available. There are some countries that doesn't publish it, so out of European states. So this will exist for sure. For me, I consider that yes, you can use your flight data to reconstruct, at least for the pre-threshold terrain. It takes a bit of work, but it is feasible. So, and we also consider that maybe visual inspection could be a way to identify what is the complexity of the runway, in particular for the complexity assessment. You could go there and assess the complexity just by using your own eyes. So there are elevation means if this occurs.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Francisco, may I add something that also aerodromes which have electronic terrain obstacle data, then it's not really necessary to have precision approach terrain chart because all this information is included in the electronic terrain obstacle data. So this is also something that they need to consider if we want to expand the operation.
Thank you very much, Vasilis. Okay, I give the floor to Olivier. Welcome again.
Yes, I wanted to to mention the fact that the PATC is required for EVS to land operation, not for EVS to approach.
Correct.
Yeah, but in any case, the information will be there. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I think if anybody has more additional elements, then can you move the question, John, and we move to the next one. We have a question about table 17 of AMC 11 CATO PMPA 110. AMC 11, I am checking in the regulation. Let me see. Yeah, it's about fail or downgraded equipment. I'm going to share with you my screen so we can see together what he's referring to. Okay, so this is what we published in June last year, and he's referring to note 1. There's no, I don't see the note 1 exactly, but John, can I? Multiple failures of runway FATO lights other than those indicated in the table should not be acceptable. So there's a note 1 apparently. Okay, he's referring to this point. Multiple failures of runways FATO lights other than those indicated in 17 should be not acceptable. I think we discussed this.
This is the one we had the question from KLM.
Yeah, and I think we have corrected that one. Bo, do you remember about this question? Because I think we corrected it in a decision 014. Do you remember anything about it?
Only that we discussed it and agreed that there was action required to clarify.
Yeah, and we answered KLM.
But we were expecting a change, but the rule hasn't been updated yet.
Ah, okay. So,
No problem.
Okay, so I think we're going to update the regulation on this matter, and to clarify this, I don't know if in the all-weather operation implementation manual we have clarified this point. I'm pretty sure that we're going to write it down, and in the next all-weather operation implementation manual, we're going to discuss this, because KLM, we received the same questions as well. And I need to verify what we did at the end with this problem. Okay, so I move on then. So I'm sorry for not being able to answer right now live, and we will answer this on the all-weather operation implementation manual. Next one. Okay. AMC1 CATO PMPA 110, there were a provision to allow the commander to assess the visibility along the runway if runway is not reported. Why is being removed? Bo, I don't remember to exactly remove this. We moved, if I remember well, and we went into. Do you remember this question?
I remember the issue, and there was, to my recollection, no move to remove this, because there is no way to have a better RVR assessment than from the pilot's position at the beginning of the runway. That is totally concurrent with the definition of RVR. So if the pilot does the counting correctly, that's the best RVR for the first that's available.
Yeah, and I don't remember that it was deleted. The pilot assessment. I think it was pilot assessment. The name. Yes, it's still here. I don't know why Sami Slim says that we have removed it. It's in the AMC1 CATO PMP 110. In the old one, but in the new one as well. And in the new one, is in that place, and it's in the asterisk. The reported visibility values, RVRs, or visibility values representative of the initial part of the takeoff run, can be replaced by pilot assessment. It's an asterisk in table 1. So Sami, please go to AMC1 CATO PMP 110 in the new regulation. You have an asterisk in table 1, and you will see there that. So nothing more to add, I guess. So we move on, John. I don't know if we really need to go through listing exactly all of them. I think there's an interesting question for FAA and FedEx. Can we go first to the other one? And there's one of FedEx below about EFVS. It's from Leicester. Yeah. And I think there's another question as well of that. FedEx has an FAA certified EFVS 100 system approved for 1/3 credit. What is required for us to get privilege consistent with EFVS A operation? I think this is also a question applicable to non-commercial, especially to non-commercial outside Europe. So operators outside Europe, third country operators. On the regulatory side, and maybe Richard and Olivier, maybe you want to also add something about your operators, outside Europe that operates Falcon. Regarding EASA, what I can tell you is that first we have the third country operator certificate, or authorization is called. And here we verify certain requirements, but at the end of the day, we as EASA, and here in general in Europe, we accept whatever is authorized in your original country, on your third country authority. So we just make a check on the ICAO requirements to make sure that they comply with ICAO. We don't require third country operators to comply with part SPA and part CAT. We just simply require you to comply with Annex 6 as appropriate. And we allow this operation. So it's not that we allow this operation, it's that on the basis of your certificate in the US and FAA, FedEx, you have a certificate, so you can operate that operational credit, and then you can fly here in Europe at the airport, at the appropriate airport with your certified EFVS 100 equipment, following 1/3 of the credit. So the only thing that you need to consider is that remember that here in Europe, EFVS, operations below 550 requires a low visibility procedures, and the airport should have developed those procedures and established those procedures at 550 meters. So that's the only thing that, but again, I don't know what are your operational requirements in FedEx, but if in FedEx it is required low visibility procedures, fine. If it's not, then you know, we don't gonna tell FAA what to do on regards to their operators. But I would like to maybe Richard or Olivier, I don't know if you have experience or similar questions with your third country operators, business jet operator, if you have a similar question to this and it's more or less on the same line that I just described.
Francisco, it's not easy to answer to this kind of question because it's a concordance between all the rules. But for me, if we are a commercial operator in US, you have to comply with the TCO authorization, and with the TCO authorization, you will grant to perform EVS in Europe. And if we are not TCO, if we are not a commercial operator, I think if we are certified, your aircraft is certified in US and you are fully trained, for me there is no problem to perform EVS in Europe.
No, correct. In the third country authorization, TCO, that is in the third country authorization, we verify that you comply with Annex 6. We don't say that you need to comply with our regulation. And then the third country authorization then will allow to fly, including the EFVS. I don't know if it's really like point out like EFVS acceptable in the TCO. I don't think so. It's just more a generic authorization. That includes all your OBSPEC authorization from FAA. If we have for the particular case of FAA, it's completely reciprocity. There's no, you know, we're having our reciprocity. We believe we have equivalent level of safety. And for other countries in the blacklist, etc., then the situation is a bit more complex for TCO. But anyway, what I wanted to say that for the particular case of FedEx and FAA, there's no problem, and the same applies to Part 91 or equivalent for non-commercial. Okay, so I think we can move on. John, thank you.
Francisco, just one thing about this question is regarding the suitability of the runway, because it's a requirement only for Europe's, and in US it's not clear that an operator has to check as we have defined in Europe. We have not exactly the same level of requirement regarding the suitability of the runway, and I don't know what. It's
they need to comply with their own requirements. The suitability of runways is a European thing. They don't have the possibility of a desktop assessment. They don't have the possibility. I think they have certain possibilities for the previous operational data. And in the US, basically the FAA has a list, that list that we commented. And then many of these things are, let's say, facilitated by FAA in the US. Outside the US, the situation is completely different, and they have a little bit more problems, let's say. We had another, because we are 53 and we need to finish in 7 minutes. I have a few questions. We had, now it swapped. Javier again went up, but I was about to answer an anonymous question. Javier, we already answered two. An anonymous question. I wonder if the requirements regarding destination alternatives are applicable for IFR flights only, or if they are applicable for VFR. One thing is ICAO, your national regulation again, and in EASA, again, we are in our weather operation webinar, is not a fuel webinar, but I can answer very quickly. The requirements generally speaking, for a destination alternate aerodrome are in CATO PMPA 182 and 182 and 181 for the new regulation applicable for the 30th of October, and generally speaking are IFR. VFR flights are not subject to an alternate flight. Then we have a special VFR and there are many other exceptions, but generally speaking, VFR flights normally does not require an alternate, and the alternate is only applicable at CATO PMPA 182 and CATO PA 182 for IFR flights. So I move on. I have other questions outside the Slido that I would like to discuss with our audience or with our panelists. The first one is if there is a state minima. If the state minima does, it means that the operator can skip the process of aerodrome operating minima, Bo, because you have explained before the CATO PMPA 110, I think it was you in your presentation. If there is a state minima, does it mean that the operator can skip the process of aerodrome operating minima under CATO PMPA 110, Bo?
To be short, no. The operator has to make their assessment as usual, and then they have to consider the state minima, so they take the higher of the two.
Thank you. I have other questions. Let me see. I don't know. I think this is for EFVS, so maybe if it's related to EFVS, I don't know, Olivier, maybe you can. So I'm going to read the questions. There are one question with 3 sub-questions or something. So can the ops credit be more than 1/3? That's kind of the first question regarding this. And sub-question, I am an operator with a system approved under CS All-Weather Operation Issue 1. So I am EFVS, well, EVS then, because it's Issue 1. I am an EVS operator under CS AWO Issue 1. Can I use this one for EFVS 200? And the same question, but can I use this for EFVS approach? So 1/3, can an ops credit be more than 1/3? And EFVS 200 and EFVS alpha for all the EVSs. Thank you, Olivier.
Okay, ops credit more than 1/3, yes, it's possible provided it has been demonstrated during the certification of the aircraft. So in the future, more performant technology may allow to have more credit, of course. And for the EVS that have been certified according to the AO1, yes, the system are eligible for EVS 200 as well as EVS 2 approach, but an approval has to be granted from the competent authority, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was answering at the same time a question in the chat regarding the CATO PMPA 181 and CATO PMPA 182. That was from the previous question.
The repetition for what you were asking, Martin.
Okay, thanks. Olivier, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move on. So again, very summary because we've been interrupted. So 1/3, yes, more than 1/3, and then for the EFVS 200, yes as well, subject to an authorization, and the same for EFVS-A, subject to an authorization. So thank you. I move on to another question.
So we referred to SPO.
For SPO is CATO is SPO OP 135. I think I need to check.
235.
235.
No. We are in the other question. I need to check, but I think it's 135. But I need to check. Next question. When you do an operational demonstration, do you need to agree for each runway the number of approaches and the plan to the operational demonstration, or it's a general process approved upfront by the authority and the operator just simply follow it for each runway, but prior approval for the plan for each runway is not required? I think this is more for Thierry. This person is asking whether when you do the operational demonstration, the number of approaches it was we mentioned in the you and me we mentioned in our that okay, so tell him I will check if it's not 135, it's another one. So Thierry, when you do the operational demonstration, the number of approaches, you have to establish a process in order to determine the number of approaches. That means that for each runway, you need to get an approval, or is just a general process and then the operator autonomously, they determine the number of approaches and shoot, you know? Thierry, I don't know if you can comment on this regarding the operational demonstration.
Yeah, for me, what needs to be agreed is the general process with the authority, and then you can do it on your own, and the authority may sample the results.
Correct, I agree. One thing that I want to say is that, so you approved it, as Thierry said, you approved your general process. Then for a particular runway, I don't know, Madrid-Barajas, then you do your operational demonstration. You don't need to ask upfront the authority, but you just follow the process. If it's one approach, then one approach. Then you record those, and the authority can come back later and ask you, okay, for Madrid, what you did. And then he can, the authority, he or she, the inspector, can check your verification of a particular runway in the past. So the authority can then verify a particular runway and a particular operational demonstration later on as part of the oversight activities, but not upfront. What you need upfront is just the general procedure. Thierry, you want to add something?
Yeah, this is the purpose of the recording of the data, is to be able to show backward what you have done.
Exactly. Especially, I mean, remember that the oversight here in Europe, for those that are not European, it moves. It can be 1 year, it can be 2 years, even it can be for sometimes, for certain aspect, 3 years. But what I want to say is that it's important that you record, and especially if there's an incident or an accident, you will ask back. And also for sampling, for the oversight, when we do an audit as an authority, we can pick up and probably in the future, it will be part of the checklist of the inspector to check and verify 1 or 2 things, 1 or 2 examples. So unfortunately, we are running out of time. With Martin, is Cato PMPA 150? Someone has said for Martin, someone is P150. Okay, I can't remember the number. I am not sure if it's 150, but anyway, we can verify in the meantime. So guys, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. So Bo, thank you. I hope you have a nice Christmas. Where are you planning to go on Christmas? You stay in Sweden, Bo?
Most likely I will. So
with a lot of snow.
Thinking all weather ops. That's inspiring exactly. When you have the bad weather. Huh?
I hope that I will be in Spain for Christmas and no bad weather, although in Madrid it's really cold sometimes. Olivier, where you go? You're planning to stay in Christmas in, because I'm not going to see you until next year. So Christmas in Bordeaux, which is with a good wine?
No, in Paris for me.
In Paris.
Yes.
No, I am the
one. I hope there is no snow. Richard, where are you going for Christmas?
For Christmas? In Spain? Yeah. No?
I am going to be in Spain, and if I can, in Mallorca. So I think we're going to Madrid anyway. But
okay, no, I stay in France. Thank you, Francisco.
Okay, Thierry,
I'm going by the sea.
You're going by the sea?
I am.
Nice.
In the south of England.
South of England, nice. Well, now you have a prime minister. Congratulations. Thierry, where are you going for Christmas?
I will probably be in the Alps with my sister.
Ah, nice. Nice snow. Very good.
I know, you know, Rob Van Ekeren's going to be in meetings in the snow with his lovely chalets.
Vasilis, don't go. Don't go. Where are you going to Greece in Christmas?
Greece, yeah. Oh, there we go. All these.
Oh, nice. Nice. In an island I love. Yes. I live in 2004, the Orchilla de Stesena in Greece.
Living in an I'm going to an island
Oh,
at
nice.
the end of the week.
Oh, wow. Okay, guys, Carl, I don't know if you are here, if you still hear us. Where are you going for Christmas?
I'm going to stay in sunny Cologne.
Oh, everyone's Christmas market. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for being there. We had more than 300 people at some point now we have 165. Thank you again for this webinar. We will stay in touch. This is the last webinar for this year, and we will resume operation, let's say, of webinars next year. So I hope you have a good implementation of Regulation 2237 and 1296 on fuel, and wish you the best. Thank you very much.
Just one last point, just to say, we're going to update all the articles over the next few weeks to improve all the information based on some of the questions and the input we've got, but also to say that we will send everybody who registered an email when the PowerPoint and the video are online. It will probably be in a day or two because it takes us a day or so to edit the video down. Thank you very much for coming.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ça y est? Ouais, c'est un webinaire.